Jonah, Reggie, we have 37 attendees already. I leave it up to you if you want to start.
Good morning. Thank you, Eduardo. Well, the time is upon us. If it's okay with Reggie, I would like to go ahead and not keep those who are present waiting. I expect that the others would be joining in a short order. Is Reggie on as yet? I can't seem to.
No, Reggie doesn't seem to be online yet.
And you can hear me clearly, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We have 43 people already in the meeting out of 61 registered.
Okay. Um, we'll give Reggie like just about 30 seconds if that's okay for everybody.
Reggie, are you in the meeting?
I am. Thank you.
Okay, great. So Jonah, over to you.
It's up to Jonah to kick off. Yeah.
Jonah, we can start the meeting whenever you're ready. We have 51 attendees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Reggie is here. So let's begin. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Welcome to our first meeting for the Financial Consideration Virtual Working Group. Both and I are delighted to continue leading the work on financial considerations. Today, we are hosting a discussion on the integrated approach to financing and capacity building, as presented in the document IP4/2, which we expect incorporate atmosphere. The discussion on the integrated approach to financing will be using guiding questions provided in the electronic feedback request of the Beyond 2020.
Right, Jonah, I think we're having some issues with your connection. Maybe you turn off your video and continue. We can't hear you now. Okay, maybe Reggie, you'd like to continue with the opening remarks while is it sorted out with Jonah? And you are muted now. I unmuted already. Okay.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, participants to this virtual working group. Just like Jonah, I would like to welcome you at this virtual working group on financial considerations. It's also a pleasure for me and also together to chair together with Jonah this session and all the virtual working groups on financial considerations. The idea is that we indeed have a further discussion, deliberations indeed on the IP3 recommendations, and hopefully we can make some progress in that respect. We are aware of the fact that we are not allowed to come with, well, at least adjustments to the current text, because that is part of the IP4 discussions we have to take care of. But I understand that Jonah is already back, but before I give the floor to him, after which he can give the floor to the Secretariat for the next agenda item, the progress of work and also the scheduling of the work and the organization of work. Again, a pleasure for me to chair this group, and hopefully we can have a fruitful meeting today, but also in our other virtual working group meetings on financial considerations. Thank you. Back to you, Jonah. Can you take over, please?
We are happy to continue as co-facilitators of this group. At this moment, I will pass the meeting on to the Secretariat to give some overview on housekeeping rules. Thank you. Secretariat, please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Reggie and Jonah, for the introductions. If I can ask you to please mute your mics while not speaking. And so now let's go over the agenda quickly here of the meeting. So Alex, please, next slide. So we do have 5 agenda items for the meeting today. And the second point of the agenda, which we'll be taking on now, will be a short overview of the virtual working group process, including a presentation on the schedule of the meetings for this virtual working group. Following that, we will go straight into the discussion on hand of today on the integrated approach to financing and capacity building, and we will spend most of the 2 hours on that. We will look first at the general views on the clearinghouse mechanism and subsidiary structure, and then move on to mainstreaming, private sector involvement, and dedicated external financing. We will use 20 minutes to discuss each of these topics and identify areas of convergence, identify any gaps, and the co-facilitators will share a summary of the inputs that we have received so far on each topic through the electronic feedback submission. Then we will move on to capacity building, and we will wrap up the meeting with a short explanation of the next electronic feedback request and the next steps. Next slide, please, Alex. I'd like to take a few seconds just to give you a short overview of the mandate of the Virtual Working Group 4 on financial considerations. And similar to the other virtual working groups, our mandate here is to make proposals that could progress the work on this topic in the lead up to the intersessional process and IP4. The specific tasks of this group include discussing views and identify possibilities for compromise on the integrated approach to financing, capacity building, strategic partnerships, financing the Secretariat, cost recovery mechanisms and other economic instruments, and the resource mobilization strategy. Next slide, please. In terms of the process that has been agreed amongst the co-facilitators to conduct this work, we can see on the slide a timeline. And we can see that since launching of the virtual working groups, we started with request for electronic feedback. So we first sent a broadcast message to all the registered members of this virtual working group on 22 of October with a first request for views on the integrated approach to financing the sound management of chemicals and waste, and also on capacity building. This process of electronic submissions ended on the 13th of November and is followed by this first meeting that we're having today, where we will be reviewing the proposals and identify possibilities for compromise, alternative text in areas of divergence, or identify any gaps on these two first topics. We will then send a second request of electronic feedback this Friday, 20th of November. And in this electronic feedback, we aim to collect views on strategic partnerships, financing the Secretariat, resource mobilization, and cost recovery mechanisms, and other economic instruments. The process of electronic submissions will close on the 11th of December, and then we will have a second virtual meeting that will take place on the 16th of December to discuss the views on these additional topics. A third meeting is scheduled on the 13th of January 2021, and this meeting we will present a summary of all consolidated inputs across these topics from the two virtual meetings, and the proposals that has been put forth under financial considerations. However, it's important to note as well that this schedule does not preclude the possibility of organizing other meetings if the need arises and the co-facilitators agree upon, so that we can progress the work of this group. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to show you where to find the relevant information about the topics and the work that is being conducted by this group. So we created, similarly as well as the other virtual working groups, a dedicated web page for this virtual working group number 4 on our website, sicam.org. And maybe, Alex, can you share your screen with the website so that everyone can see it? In this dedicated web page, you will find all information related to this group. So if you scroll down, please, onto the virtual working group of 4. So you have a first tab with the general information, where there is also the calendar, and you can also find the registration links for the upcoming meetings of this group. And then next to it, you have pre-session documents. So all background information for this group is also available here, and we will go over that in the presentation. You have also outputs and recording. So here we will be producing a summary report of this meeting, and it will be uploaded here so that it will be publicly available. But also we will have here the recording of this meeting available. Presentations. So we have all the presentations that would be put on these virtual meetings, and the next tab on stakeholder inputs has all the submissions that we have received for now on the first electronic feedback request, so that they are also all available for all the stakeholders to be able to look at them. And on the right-hand side of the page, you can see that there is a calendar. So this calendar is available and includes all the meetings of all the virtual working groups, and also the technical briefings that has been scheduled so far. So I'm sure that many of you are participating in other virtual working groups. So here you can find the overall overview. So now if we can come back to the presentation and onto the next slide, I'll just briefly talk about the background documents that we have for the work of this group. Next slide. So we have, these are very important pieces of information to reflect on as we move on into today's discussion, but also as we move forward on financial considerations in general. So the first, of course, is the compilation of recommendations document, which is in SciChem, the document SciChem/IP4/2. And this is certainly a key piece of information that we will be looking at constantly in this group. Then we have also document SciChem/IP4/5, which is the stakeholder inputs on the proposed draft capacity building principles that was developed at IP3. We have also the draft proposal for a resource mobilization strategy. And finally, we have document SciChem/IP4/7, review of cost recovery mechanisms and other economic instruments for financing the sound management of chemicals and waste. All these documents are available in the web page that I just shared with you, but also links of them has been included in every electronic submission request that have been forwarded to the members of the group. Next slide, please. So in terms of the electronic feedback that we have received on the first set of questions on integrated approach and on capacity building, we received 13 submissions from stakeholders or group of stakeholders, which are all listed in this slide. And again, those are also available in the web page. So you can see that the call for submission was well received, and we actually have a well-balanced representation of inputs received from stakeholders. The co-facilitators will share a summary of these inputs per each one of the topics as we move on in the meeting today. So that ends my general introduction. Many of you are participating in the other virtual working groups, so are familiar with the procedures. There is one group on governance, one on targets and indicators, and another one on issues of concern. We are all very busy and scheduled in these groups and in the Secretariat, and I thank you all for your participation and active contributions. The SciChem Secretariat is doing our best behind the scenes to ensure that the work of these 4 groups progresses as much as possible. And all groups have also 2 co-facilitators that are leading the work. And we're grateful to have here Jonah and Reggie as co-facilitators of this virtual working group, and look forward to working with you both. I'm going to, before giving the floor to Jonah to open the discussion of today, I'll probably will spend some few minutes to share with you some housekeeping rules. So Alex, if you can open as well the, now share the functionalities of WebEx as we discussed. As you know, all discussions will take place through oral interventions. And in order to take the floor, what we would like you to do is to use the raise hand function that Alex should be showing you right now. If you see on the right hand of the screen, there is a small hand. So that's, you can click on it, and that would indicate us that you'd like to take the floor. And then when I call your name, then I will open your microphone at the same time so you can take the floor. Please, when you start your intervention, it would be great if you can say your country or the organization that you're representing for the knowledge of everyone here. And try to keep your intervention short. We have limited time, and we have more than 60 participants right now. So in order to give everyone the opportunity to speak, we encourage you to do your interventions briefly. Also, please lower your hand when you finish your intervention, and mute your mic immediately after. If you have any issues, you can use also the chat function that you have also on the right-hand side at the bottom. You can send a message either to all attendees, or and if you have any problem, then one of my colleagues will assist you and troubleshoot. But also, if ever you cannot find the raise hand function that Alex has signaled in yellow there, you can also use the chat to indicate that you'd like to take the floor. So with that said, I think we can return to the presentation and we can move on to the next agenda item to open the discussion on the integrated approach. And again, as a reminder, we will have 20 minutes per topic. So Jonah, now over to you. And Alex, please put on the presentation.
Thank you, Eduardo. Okay. So now we turn our attention to the first part of the discussions, which is the chat poll on the integrated approach to financing. We received a number of submissions and comments, and summarized it to say that number of stakeholders suggested that the chat pool for financial consideration should indicate that adequate, predictable, and sustainable financing is essential to achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the objectives of the targets of the new agreement. This explicit recognition could help secure multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral support. So with that summary, we would like to open up the floor for inputs on this agenda item on the shuffle. It is also important to note that at this moment, in the IP4/2 document, the 5 paragraphs, paragraph 4 and 5, does not have any brackets in it. So at this moment, we expect that there would not be any interventions as it relates to these 2 paragraphs. However, we do have a number of brackets in the first 3 paragraphs and would welcome comments and suggestions or positions and opinions on these paragraphs if they are in.
So I will now give the floor to Ana Fernandez from Argentina, followed by David Al-Sulay from IPEN. Ana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Eduardo. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, hello, everyone. And first of all, I would like to thank the co-facilitators and the Secretariat for organizing this meeting and the well-prepared and the documents well-prepared in advance. Well, my name is Ana Fernandez Blanco. I'm one of the GRULAC representatives before the Bureau. And in this sense, I would like to summarize at this point of the agenda some of the comments submitted by GRULAC in a document that it is already available on the SICAM website and its dedicated web page. So first of all, as a general comment, to begin with, GRULAC will like to express that according to the current mandate of this virtual working group, this do not include the negotiation on the text under analyze, so brackets must remain through the original document. Of course, I will also invite my GRULAC colleagues to take the floor anytime they want to complement what I'm saying. So regarding this this general overview, we consider that establishing a clearinghouse mechanism should be seen as one more components of the SICAM financial scheme post 2020. Of course, this cannot replace the possibility of negotiating a financial mechanism under the new framework, but we believe that this mechanism could provide transparency to track the allocated resources. In this regard, we'll ask the Secretariat to clarify some key points, like the scope of this proposal, how its operation and objective will be like, and of course, we consider that we know that at this moment the document presents options like creating a clearinghouse mechanism or establishing an arrangement process or subsidiary structure. We are open to discuss that. To finalize, we would like to consider a periodic and scheduled instance to inform SICAM stakeholders with sufficient time to program the actions that we are like to exchange experiences in appropriate way and various level of knowledge. And of course, with awareness of citizens. So finally, we suggest to explore the possibility to place the text about the clearinghouse mechanism in the section of the function of the Secretariat in section 7, literal C. Thank you.
We now have David Azulay from CL, followed by Laura Niskanen from Finland.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. I'm hoping that you can all hear me. Maybe before I start, I had a quick question for the co-chairs, whether you would want us to go through the submissions, because all of the proposals and comment we've made through written submissions. I understand that the idea of the meeting is indeed for us to go through the submission, but before I started repeating what we've sent in writing form, I just want to check that this is what you're expecting of us participants.
Yeah. Thank you, CL. Is that correct? The objective of the meeting is not necessarily to repeat the submissions that you have already made, but to give more or less come to some sort of understanding and to receive your views. So we have received the submissions, we have looked at them, and we have compiled them into a summary. And that would be what would be more or less presented at the beginning of each agenda item as to where the thinking of the different parties and delegates are and what ideas that they have in common. It is, or we expect that you would, if you have additional comments, or if there's a point that you would like to stress further, then you're free to do so. For time constraints reasons, at this moment we are unable to go in detail into every submission, but you're welcome to summarize your submission so that everyone present could hear. If I could take this moment also to address the previous speaker. Yes, we acknowledged that the mandate of this group is not to negotiate the text, but in instances where we have texts that are not in brackets, my reasoning for mentioning them is that we could focus our comments again, because of time constraints on areas that are still somewhat contentious and open for debate instead of deliberating on items that are more or less have achieved consensus. I hope this answers your question and concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. So if you allow me, I'll just like to make a few brief points, mostly from our submissions, but also general comments on the general overview. First of all, we believe that it would be quite useful and important to add a new chapeau sentence at the top of the finance sections to articulate that adequate, predictable, and sustainable financing is essential to achieving the goals and target of the 2030 agenda and the more specific objectives and target of the new agreement. This is something that we have, that was made apparent for anyone who has participated in the SAICM implementation over the past few years, but also which was made apparent by the independent SAICM evaluations. We have element of suggested text that we propose in our submission that I will not go through now. We are also supporting and in favor of a clearinghouse mechanism, a mechanism that should track development aid and other financing for the sound management of chemicals, and ideally report back during each international conference. We believe that this would be an important support for countries in identifying and accessing new potential sources of funding for the sound management of chemicals and waste, as well as facilitate stock taking and course correction in the establishment of sustainable financing for this particular process. We also believe in that respect that submission should be independently reviewed and verified through good accounting practices and should ideally distinguish, when possible, between pledges and disbursement. We also see value in the proposal for a review mechanism to ensure regular review of financial and technical support mechanism. But we do believe that this proposal should be further fleshed out so as to guarantee that it is built to deliver effective proposal. And also mention that the periodic financial needs assessment and effectiveness evaluation performed by the Stockholm Convention could serve as a useful model for similar evaluation in SAICM. That mechanism for reviewing financing and technical support could be placed in the finance section or maybe more adequately under the governance part of the new agreement. Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Sia.
So I'll give now the floor to Laura from Finland, followed by Andrew from USA. And if I can please ask you to be brief on your interventions. We have about 7 minutes left on this topic. So Laura, the floor is yours. Laura, your mic has been unmuted. Okay, it seems that you might be having some issues. Maybe while you sorted it out, I'll pass on to Andrew from USA.
Hello, good morning, and thank you to the Secretariat and to our co-chairs for organizing this meeting. I'm certainly looking forward to working with all of you as we move forward on this important work. The United States did have a written submission, so I won't say everything that was in there, but maybe just kind of elaborate on a couple of items. One on the clearinghouse mechanism, we do agree that this would be a good idea. I think that one thing that's important, I believe, for all stakeholders to know and to understand better is to know where there are certain potential sources of funding available and to keep track of those and be able to share that information with those who would need to access those sources. So I think this could be something that could be very useful for stakeholders and also just for all of us to understand whether we're donors to understand the whole wide range of these and different sources and how they interconnect, and also for those who might need to access this funding. So we think we are supportive of this idea. So we do, agree with paragraph 2, I believe. On the issue of an arrangement or some other process to review these mechanisms, we are a bit concerned about that. I think when we're looking at these varieties of sources, we're kind of looking at a lot of different bodies that have their own rules on how they operate, what kind of sources for funding they have. They often have their own rules and procedures for how they approve dispersing funds and for their own review processes. So we don't really think that this body would be the right one to be reviewing all of these different mechanisms. So we are a little bit more skeptical of this idea. But I think we're certainly interested in hearing other thoughts. But for this one, we're not really in favor of this item in paragraph 3. And then for other items, we did have some suggestions on paragraph 1, but I'll just leave that to my written submission in order to keep us brief here. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So I'll give the floor now to Caroline Vickers from WHO, followed by Ms. Iwasaki.
Yes, thank you very much, and hello everyone. So the World Health Organization's submission, it made a number of proposals for improvement of the text to better reflect the multi-sectoral nature of SciCam. And we think it would be appropriate to set this out clearly at the outset in paragraph 1. And we have some suggestions in our submission. The integrated approach must consider the multi-sectoral character of sound chemicals management to ensure the participation of representatives of all involved sectors, either at a national, regional, or global level. And we've received very strong and consistent feedback from the health sector representatives in respect of making sure that the arrangements for financing need to support balanced sectoral access and participation. So thank you for consideration of this input.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So next, Atsushi Iwasaki, the floor is yours.
Thank you, co-facilitator, and I would like to thank the co-facilitator and the Secretariat for preparing for this session and giving opportunity to submit the written comments. Here, I would like to make 2 comments. First one is about the clearinghouse mechanism. Our view about the clearinghouse mechanism is that all stakeholders can benefit from the clearinghouse by having access to information necessary to implement sound management of chemicals and waste. But the necessity of establishment a clearinghouse mechanism under the Secretariat is not clear to us. And we also need to know its operating cost for our consideration. In addition, we think that the establishment such mechanism should be considered consistent with the content of the Chapter 6 about the mechanism to support implementation. Second comment is about the arrangement process or subsidiary structure for review. Our initial reaction is that the proposed idea is too broad and general to consider the content. A new subsidiary body could be established depending on its necessity, according to the Chapter 6 about the mechanism to support implementation. We think that before we commit to establishing a new arrangement process or subsidiary structure, we need to identify the need of establishing a new structure, as well as its purpose, focus issues, and the basic framework in line with the subsidiary and ad hoc expert bodies of the Chapter 6. Thank you very much.
In the interest of time, we'll close the request for the floor now, and we'll continue with Laura from Finland and followed by Laura from UK, and then we can move on to the next topic. So Laura from Finland, we will try it again. You are unmuted. Okay, it doesn't seem to work. I'll pass on then to Laura from UK as the last intervention on this topic. Laura, Laura from UK, the floor is yours. Okay, it seems that you might also have some troubles with the mic. You are unmuted here, but we can't hear you. So for you and Finland, if you'd like, you can submit your comments or question on the chat. And,
Hello, sorry.
Okay, now we can hear you. Yes.
Sorry about that. First of all, thank you to the Secretariat and the co-facilitators for their work on financial considerations. The UK would like to request further clarity on the scope and the scale of the proposed clearinghouse mechanism. We think that would be useful to have a review of that. And similar to the US, we're not too sure about the subsidiary structure. Thank you.
There are no more requests for the floor, Jonas, so over to you.
Thank you, Eduardo, and thank you to all the attendees who contributed to the discussion, this very vibrant discussion, either here in this platform through the virtual working group or through submissions previous to the working group. As it relates to the clearinghouse mechanism for tracking development aid, I summarize that we have heard more or less of a general support for the establishment of such a mechanism. We may need to look at, develop more what exactly is its function. Nonetheless, the comments and through this platform and the submission will be taken into consideration in the preparation of proposed text that we could all review and submit further comments. As it relates to the item B, agenda for the process of subsidiary structure for review, of opinion on the establishment of such an arrangement. So we will look at the comments as the previous thing, and maybe we could continue discussing as we move forward to see if we could come to some sort of consensus. Again, thank you for your comments on this section. Moving on to mainstreaming, which is the second item on the agenda. We received a number of submissions by electronic format, a total of 11 plus submissions. And in a summary of the submissions, we summarized that stakeholders agreed to more or less concrete actions and mechanisms for mainstreaming are crucial at a national level by both national governments and the private sector. However, it should be noted that some stakeholders disagreed with the adoption of mechanisms and actions that would be imposed on countries to achieve mainstreaming, considering that the Beyond 2020 is a voluntary framework. Nonetheless, all stakeholders agreed to encourage governments to adopt national policies for the sound management of chemicals and waste. We did receive a number of diverse views, and with that summary, I would like to open up the floor for comments and inputs on mainstreaming. Thank you.
Again, please remember to use the raise hand function to request for the floor, or if you are unable to find it, use the chat function. So Laura from Finland has requested the floor, so I'll unmute you. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, clear.
Okay, finally. I'm really sorry for this. I tested twice when I joined, but sorry for that. As I was not able to speak in the previous, I would just like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, and also introduce myself. I'm Laura Niskanen from the Ministry of the Environment of Finland, and I am here today speaking on behalf of the European Union and its member states. On the previous points, I will not go there, but I would just refer back to the submission that we also submitted. And now I would like to summarize some of the main points from our submission regarding mainstreaming. So we consider mainstreaming as one of the crucial activities to implement sound management of chemicals and waste and to achieve the SDGs in total. And we see benefits of sound management and chemicals and waste to sustainable development, and the costs of action are much less than the costs associated with inaction. And we think that this should be one of the driving forces for governments in ensuring that sound management of chemicals and waste is mainstreamed into national budgeting processes and national development plans, as well as international programs. So we think also it's useful to recall the actions related to mainstreaming in the decision on integrated approach, as the actions and mechanisms can be diverse and are necessary at different governmental levels. We suggested some possible activities at national level in our submission, which was actually drawing from existing text in the OPS. And this possible activity would be setting up an interministerial fora, also involving stakeholders and sectors, and to consider sound management of chemicals waste in planning at national level. And this fora could look at issues like establishing environmental and social safeguards for chemical safety and circular economy in the different plans and programs, identifying potential synergies through coordinated and joint implementation of plans and programs, also considering sound management of chemicals and waste in work of governing bodies of intergovernmental organizations, and also considering the benefits of action in sound management of chemicals and waste. And just to highlight that we also see that the private sector could also mainstream and ensure sound management of chemicals and waste throughout the life cycle of chemicals, including waste. And this would start with the design of chemicals and products and goes to their use up to the treatment of waste. And finally, just very shortly, we would welcome the finance sector to be more involved in the implementation of the sound management and chemicals and waste. And further details are in our submission. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Jonah, there are no other requests for the floor. Okay, there is one request from David Azulay from Ciel, followed by Servet from ICCA. So David, you are unmuted.
Thank you very much. In addition to what was just mentioned by the EU, which I think we would very much largely support, just want to mention one element that was identified in the UNEP evaluation of the integrated approach, which was a recommendation to make a formal request to donors to make an overt signals to chemicals and waste that chemicals and waste are a fundable component of development plans, and that request could include an explicit mention or could include a request to donor countries to enhance collaboration between international development cooperation agencies and authorities in charge of sound management of chemicals to ensure that the consideration in one area are carried forward and also taken into consideration into the decision around development aid and finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution.
Servet, you are unmuted.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Servet, and I represent the ICCA and industry. Thank you for organizing today's meeting. I think it's very important to talk about the financial considerations. Regarding the concrete questions on what are the mechanisms for mainstreaming, I think actually industry thinks that the most significant way to achieve mainstreaming is also through the establishment of the fee-based chemical management systems in each country. And this was, I think, mentioned also in previous virtual working groups, but not specifically on this working group. Regarding the idea mentioned by Laura to set up a fora to concretely discuss what can be done and to have a multi-stakeholder approach, I think this is something that we can all agree upon. On the notion of the tools, there are many tools developed by UNEP, by governments and industry that can help guide developing countries in particular in setting up basic systems. I will elaborate a bit more when we will discuss in the private sector engagement our concrete ideas on how we can actually act all jointly and to have let's say a common marketplace where we can bring in all our work, all our thoughts, and including all our financial support. But perhaps I keep that for the session on C, where we discuss the private sector engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I have next on the list Agustin Arte from Argentina, followed by Ana Fernandez from Argentina/GRULAC. So Agustin, the floor is yours.
Very much. Thank you, Co-Chair Secretariat. Yes, my intervention would be for Argentina, and then Ana will speak on behalf of GRULAC. First, I wanted to say that comments that will be made by GRULAC, of course, are supported by Argentina, but we would like to add a few things. One of the things that Argentina would like to highlight is that in order to advance on the mainstreaming to guarantee the implementation and sustainability of the work under this agenda, there has to be progressive efforts, and this transition cannot happen from one day to another. The internalization of costs, the inclusion of these topics on the national budgets, the distribution of those funds, and the implementation of new and innovative financial strategies, all these elements require enough time. The international cooperation, the bilateral cooperation, for example, North-South or South-South, and the institutional strengthening are all vital in order to develop the mainstreaming. So the other financial aspects under the integrated approach are crucial if we want to achieve the mainstreaming. We support the text that is already there in the document, but we would also like to request, we have seen other comments from other stakeholders requesting SciComm to provide guidance, maybe develop a methodological guideline. That is an idea that we could explore, but we will also have to take into account that that has already been done in many other places from the private sector, OECD, and so on. So we would like to build on those experiences to have guidance, especially for developing countries, on which are the elements and which are the main actions that countries should focus on when talking about mainstreaming. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive contribution, Argentina.
I'll give the floor now to Ana Fernandez on behalf of GRULAC. The floor is yours. Ana, we can't hear you. You have been unmuted. Okay, it seems that you might have some technical problems, so I will mute you, and I will give the floor now to Andrew Clark from USA.
Yes, thank you, Eduardo. Yes, I think that we would like to just point out that mainstreaming, we agree, is a very important part of the integrated approach. I think that we agree with much of what was put forward by the EU in their submission, particularly about the different activities that can be done, such as safeguards and other things in the international organizations to help bring the sound management of chemicals to as part of the their work programs and development funding generally. And we, in the United States, are also increasingly including financing for environmental projects generally, and the sound management of chemicals and waste in particular. And our efforts are bilateral and regional assistance, development assistance. So we think this is something that's very crucial, and we look forward to further exploring some of the ideas put forward by the EU and others, and how this can be done, and how we can make practical progress through mainstreaming, and how it can complement and even enhance the other aspects of the integrated approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clark from USA.
I will try it again, Jonah, with GRULAC, with Ana. So I will unmute you again, Ana, to see if you can take the floor. It doesn't seem to work, your mic, Ana. So, Jonah, there are no more requests for the floor now.
Thank you very much, Eduardo, for the participants. Ana, you could always use the chat or any who wish to contribute but maybe having issues with the mic. You could always type in your contribution in the chat box and it will be acknowledged. Under this topic, we have received a number of comments giving general support for mainstreaming, and we will take these comments, both those that we receive here and then write it into consideration as we develop the text for this, the outcome document of this meeting. Again, I've come to the end of, or the first end of my facilitating of this virtual working group. And thank you to all who participated and contributed to this very vibrant discussion. I will now pass on to my co-facilitator, Reggie, from the Netherlands, who will continue on the next topic of private sector involvement. Thank you very much, Eduardo. Reggie? Reggie, if you can hear me, would you please take the floor?
Yeah, thank you, Jonah. Took some time to connect it. First of all, again, participants to this virtual working group. Nice to see you, or see you. No, that's not the case, but at least nice that you also participate in this virtual working group. It's now up to me to lead the discussions through the following items. The following item will be indeed the private sector in involvement. And as you may recall, we have opened this discussion by asking you for written input on open questions, as we call it. And the question at stake now is, how would private sector involvement support the sound management of chemicals and waste? In that context, we received 11 submissions, and having a close look at all those submissions, well, it is our view that at least all stakeholders agree that private sector involvement is crucial to achieve the sound management of chemicals and waste. And most stakeholders highlighted that industry contributions need to be strengthened and that governments should encourage the private sector to assume greater responsibility and increase their contributions. Concrete actions include, but are not limited to, in-kind support, capacity building, technical assistance, sharing of practices, innovation, harmonized industry standards, and labeling. That is based on the input we received so far. I'm happy now to open the floor for participants in this session to provide some more information about that, to justify their submissions, or perhaps even come with some new ideas and new proposals. The floor is open for those who want to take the floor on this issue. Please.
So we have Servet from ICCA who's asking for the floor.
Yes.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Regie. I think the title suggests that we take the floor as the first. So here with the voice of ICCA and industry. I think we can all agree upon one thing, and I think Ipe and David also mentioned it, the importance of finance to these discussions, but also the importance of capacity building. And for us, these two go hand in hand. So we fully recognize that many countries do not yet have these needed funding and also not the expertise to meet all the SAICM objectives. We also have to recognize that there are significant amount of capacity building efforts already being done by various stakeholders, not only industry, but also the donor governments, the IGOs, the NGOs. But I think we need to recognize that these are not coordinated, and we are lacking a common place where all these capacity building efforts come together and made visible. So we have made a submission, and because of the time, I will not go too much into the details, but we have made a submission in which we explore the thought of a clearinghouse mechanism. And this is indeed a bit confusing because we were also discussing another clearinghouse mechanism before, but our proposal is to have let's say, a common marketplace where we can put all the initiatives in one place, and such a common place, let me not call it a clearinghouse now, but such a common place will serve as, let's say, not only mapping out existing capacity building efforts, but it will also help to track down progress and to feed in this tracking into the SAICM international process meetings. But above all, it could also generate additional funding. So as I said, we have the details as a thought starter, because we don't pretend this is the silver bullet that will save our financial issues. But we strongly believe that this is a step forward in addressing the shortcomings that we have been witnessing so far on capacity building and funding. And I would like to recall the study that was done it was one of the meetings, I believe in IP3, done by the SAICM Secretariat on the QSP experiences. And now, if you allow me, Chair, I would just like to focus on a few of these recommendations where we have built upon when we were developing our thoughts on our capacity building clearinghouse. So this study made by the SAICM Secretariat showed that there is a clear need for a focusing the building on national regulatory capacity, that it can be sustainable and sustained even after the project has been terminated. The study showed that there was a need for a follow-up mechanism and a clear and a few selected targets that should be achieved in the years after the completion of the capacity building effort. There was also a need that the project should not be a standalone one, but it should be part of a country's comprehensive chemicals management planning. There was a need to have a tailor-made design of each of these capacity building efforts, and these should be country-specific and needs-specific. And the last one, and that's actually a favorite one, it says that we need a long-term commitment not only by the receiving party, but also by the providing parties. So with all these in mind, we elaborated on a thought called the Capacity Building Clearinghouse in order to have a joint initiative on how to be more efficient and effective with the many capacity buildings that we are doing, but also to generate additional funding where supply can meet demand and where we can find a common denominator by both supplier and the demandeur, so we can also generate additional funding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for this intervention, ICCA in this industry. Servet, thank you very much. I notice that, please, Eduardo, you can call on for the next speaker.
Yes, next on the list is Andrew Clark from USA.
Andrew, please.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think we have in the text in this portion, there are a lot of, I think, different variations of the ideas on private sector involvement. And just to kind of generally comment, we do support a call to governments to implement actions to encourage industry involvement in an integrated approach, and including developing legislation on responsibilities of industry and national administration, and incentives and other tools that can be used to promote the industry to internalize costs. But we do note that governments do have a wide variety of policy options to reach these overall goals. So we don't support the call for specific policies on how this should be done. We think that countries really should have the flexibility to implement these kinds of policies in the way that best fits their own national circumstances, their own legislation, their own regulatory policies. So I think that, just to say in the first couple of paragraphs, we support the idea of what's being called for, but we don't want to highlight any specific policies that countries should implement. And we also, support the private sector entities throughout the value chain to increase their contributions to the implementation of the sound management of chemicals and waste, as highlighted in the paragraph 10 and the variation in alt 10. We do have some, I guess, maybe some questions for paragraph, the financial sector guidance that's mentioned in paragraph 11 or in alt 11. I think that we don't really understand who would be called upon there to develop the guidance, and how it would be implemented, or who would be called upon to implement it. So we do have some concerns for the call for this financial sector guidance. So I think that would need to be elaborated further before we could get behind any idea like that. And I would just note that we also, address these issues in our written submission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And your question is noted, so we will take that into account for the next time on how to proceed. Eduardo, somebody else who?
Reggie, there are no more requests for the floor. Okay. Now they came in. Okay, a few came in already. So we will have Laura from Finland first, followed by Eloise from UNEP.
Thank you. EU, please, you have the floor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, sorry, just checking. Thank you. So I guess our views on this private sector involvement, like the US was also describing, there's the two aspects: what would be the role of the government and what would be the role of the private sector. So we also see that it is necessary that governments implement actions, rules, regulation, and use appropriate economic instruments to internalize external costs. And to further establish and enforce legislation to implement cost recovery from the private sector. Also necessary to define responsibilities for daily chemical safety at production sites and in the supply chain, and also to implement the principles of extended producer responsibility and polluter pays principle. So we do call after a greater responsibility from the private sector to cover the cost of the services provided by the public services as well, and the costs associated with the risks caused by its businesses and activities. And we think that complying with the extended producer responsibility and ensuring compliance with the legal requirements, including implementation of GHS and the payment of fees and taxes, should be a matter of course. Regarding cost recovery, we just wanted to highlight the good compilation of examples that is included in the document IP4/7 on the review of cost recovery, and we look forward to discussing that in further detail later on. But we do see additional commitment by the private sector being necessary to implement the sound management of chemicals and waste. And in our submission, we encourage the private sector to provide further ideas, and we are happy to hear now the presentation by ICCA. And if I may very quickly to shortly react on the proposal. So we thank for putting forward this proposal for capacity building clearinghouse. And we acknowledge the need for capacity building in sound management of chemicals and waste in recipient countries, and we see a merit in having an in-depth discussion on this proposal. Perhaps some initial comments from our side would be that before establishing any mechanism, we think that the first step would be to consider the functions. And if we understand correctly from the proposal, the aim is to bring together the demand and supply of capacity building. We see that such a virtual marketplace could be embedded in the Beyond 2020 framework, and it could also be considered that a secretariat or one of the IOMC organizations could play a role in the management. But we would just emphasize that we think that such a mechanism would in particular materialize the private sector involvement, and we look forward to discussing it further. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, AU, for your intervention. Is there a next speaker, Eduardo?
Yeah, we have UNEP afterwards, and then David Azulay from CIEL. So now over to you, UNEP.
Thank you very much. Eduardo, I'm Eloise Tooney from UNEP's Chemical and Health branch. So just looking back on our submission, which you will find on the website, we just wanted to note a few things on the private sector engagement. The first one is that there are many, as well as the chemical manufacturers companies, the SciCam, the 2020 instrument should also bring in the main users of chemicals. And it has already highlighted some of the sectors like textiles, electronics, etc., through the existing emerging policy issues. So the first observation is that all of those sectors should be brought in and be contributing to the sound management of chemicals. In our written submission, we focus more on the mandatory kind of support which the private sector should be bringing, and as has been said by the other speakers, focusing on government policy mandated contributions such as extended producer responsibility and others. But we also note that there are also voluntary support that is made by especially the users of chemicals to replace most hazardous chemicals with safer alternatives. And so all of those, the voluntary ones especially, but even the mandatory ones, are poorly quantified at the moment. And there is definitely scope to make a mapping to identify the existing contribution. And to plan for increasing that contribution. We would agree with the previous speakers that at the level of the text before us, it is indeed a bit it's selective to mention, extended producer responsibility, but not, registration fees. So we believe that that level of detail would be better suited in a resource mobilization strategy. And in this context, we note the document prepared by the Secretariat, which was shared, a draft resource mobilization strategy. We believe it's a very good start to having a strategic approach for the financial mechanism. And we noted that the Secretariat draft focuses heavily on financing the Secretariat and financing the kind of international part of the Beyond 2020 instrument. And it has a very large gap, which is the financial and other resources that stakeholders need for their implementation of the actual Beyond 2020 instrument. So in our submission, we've proposed a sort of matrix approach of how to finance both the Beyond 2020 instrument itself, but also, and more importantly, the stakeholder actions that are needed, and then mapping that to the integrated approach and all three of the pillars of the integrated approach. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, UNEP, Tony, for your intervention. Next speaker, if I recall well, was Ciel. David asked for the floor. David, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So first of all, because we're having this discussion in the context of finance consideration, I will focus my intervention, and we have focused our submission on the financial contribution. I do believe that there is a lot of additional and other aspects of private sector involvement and engagement in SAICM implementation that is very much needed. But again, my understanding was that this conversation was about financial consideration, financial contribution. In that respect, we are basing our approach and proposals on well-established and unquestioned legal international principles, such as the polluter pays principle. And we've heard a number of comments calling for the implementation or the operationalization of these principles at national level. And while we do believe that there is an important role for each country to adopt a number of instruments and mechanisms to adjust the resource mobilization to their situation, we also do believe that only limiting approach to, or only limiting our thinking to national approach disregards a number of fundamental elements, factual elements of the situation. First of all, it largely disregards the reality and of the global nature of the supply chain and of the global nature of the industry and the global nature of impacts, which cannot be dealt adequately at national level. And some countries are bearing impacts from activities that are located very far from their territory. And so this already is a little surprising to us, in particular in conjunction with calls we've heard before about establishing a level playing field. Having been involved in quite a number of projects trying to support countries putting in place institutional and legal framework to support the sound management of chemicals, including through economic instruments, we did identify that the need to create a level playing field between countries neighboring and others was extremely important. In the same vein, it also disregards the fact that such instruments are limited by nature because of what we mentioned before. And just two quick points, these limitations are identified and recognized in the report that was prepared, the IP4/7 report that does identify a number of limitations in this regards. In addition to maybe using one basic example, the one region in the world that is most advanced in developing economic instruments to support the financing of sound management of chemicals. And here I am thinking of the EU. Even the EU, which has a very large chemical industry, a lot of activities, and very well developed legal framework around this, is struggling to ensure that fees collected from the industry is enough to finance the European chemical agencies and to finance all risk reduction and risk management measures. So in that regard, we strongly believe that there is a need to coordinate at the global level approaches to the mobilization of resources and to coordinate activities to operationalize this pillar of the integrated approach, the industry involvement in the financing. We do have a quite detailed proposal that was put forward that focuses on a small number of chemicals so we're really we try to identify what part of the chemical supply chain was the most favorable or the ideal one to be the object of certain economic instruments. I know that economic instruments will be the topic and subject of the second part of our meeting, so I will reserve some of our comments there. But in the meantime, I do invite all participants to take a look at our submission that already provides some details about what our proposals are for some coordinated approach to this mobilization, as well as to a larger thought starters that is available online, both on IPEN and CL websites. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, David. I was just on the verge of interrupting you because we are also running out of our time for this agenda item, but I'm glad that you finished well with your conclusion on how to proceed, what to take as a next step to have a look at your proposal in that respect. Having said that, I suggest that there's only one speaker left, Argentina. That after that we will close this agenda item, that we then will move on to the next one. But again, before doing that, Argentina, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Yes, a few comments building on previous interventions. First of all, we agree this section is particularly targeted to the financial issues. I heard some other comments that maybe they are suitable for other parts of the SAICM document, as, for example, capacity building. Regarding the aspects, the financial aspects within the private sector, I think we should think of the two different aspects. On one side, we see text that is inviting the private sector to enhance and improve the financing on the chemicals and waste agenda within their own frameworks and within their own responsibilities and work. But we still lack of a specific text that clearly invites the private sector to get engaged and involved within SAICM activities. So regarding the financial issue there, we would like to see something that clearly states, and of course it won't be mandatory, it will be an invitation, but to support the activities that will be done within the framework. One thing is that the private sector complies with national legislation and complies with international agreements and do what they are intended to do. But another thing is to make another step and work in collaboration with other stakeholders to enhance the work within the framework. And I can give you a good example of an experience that, at least in Argentina, is working very good, which is the responsible care program done by the ICCA. That is an additional effort that the chemical industry does to enhance the work within the chemicals and waste agenda. So those are the kind of things that we would like to see, and and we would like to see further collaboration within the different aspects covered by the new framework. So these two different issues of financing within the private sector should be correctly reflected in the text. Regarding paragraph 11 and alt 11, I think we have a good idea there, but I've heard some comments and I want to echo them. We need to explore further who are we targeting when we say the financial sector and the investors. I think that there's a good opportunity to look at that and come out with more specific text or a clearer text that actually takes form into a new guideline or new recommendations for that sector. Sorry, Mr. Co-Chair, but it is my understanding that Anna, for representing RULAC, is also requesting the floor. I don't see if you can see her hand, but she has been requesting the floor as well. And that's all the comments from Argentina at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Augustine, for your intervention. And of course, just one exception, I give RULAC the floor also to come with an intervention. Please, Anna, the floor is yours. And then we will finish with this discussion. Please, Anna.
Anna, you have been unmuted. It seems she's having still some issues with the mic region.
Okay, well, then I suggest that, well, RULAC, Anna, if you want to submit your oral statement in written form, then of course you can always do that. And but also given the time, I suggest that we finish the discussion on this agenda item. What I understood is that there is general support for private sector involvement. And also listening to the other comments which were made from the floor today, I think, well, there is merit indeed, because I also noticed that Augustine prepared some text which could be adjusted in the current amendments. There was also ICCA/industry who made this new proposal for Clearinghouse on capacity building. And I think also based on the experience we gained at the IP3 meeting a long time ago when we were in Montevideo, there was this small contact group, working group, who elaborated a bit on preparing draft recommendations for the contact group on financial consideration. It is my intention to follow a similar approach, but then of course in a virtual way. And since we are talking here about well, the input of the private sector, I would ask ICCA to organize and to lead some of these discussions on the private sector involvement with well, the mandate at least to have a close look, first of all, at the current text, which is in the IP3 document, the draft recommendations, and try to elaborate a bit and make some proposals on what can be improved, in particular with respect to the role of the finance sector, I understand. But also I would like to ask this group to discuss in more detail this clearinghouse for capacity building, which is indeed now being dealt with in the thought starter of ICCA. Because I think it would be a good result of not only that small working group, not only from the virtual working group, but perhaps also from the whole negotiating process until ICCM5, if a proposal could be launched, which indeed captures well, this private sector involvement with indeed the capacity building, clearinghouse, or whatever the name of the mechanism will be. So may I ask indeed ICCA to lead these discussions, to organize it in close cooperation with the SAICM Secretariat. And of course, it is open for all stakeholders well, to participate in such this discussion. Okay, having said that, I think we can now move on to the next agenda item. That is indeed the dedicated external financing. And the question we asked prior to this meeting to participants was indeed, how can SAICM inform the JEF replenishment process and what are their priority areas? We have received 7 submissions which dealt with that question, and also given all those submissions, putting them all together, it is our view that all stakeholders agree that SAICM, through the ICCM, should formulate the priority areas and key issues of concern, focusing on elements that contribute to global benefits to be addressed under the new framework, and communicate these to the JEF to inform the JEF replenishment process. A clear mandate to support developing countries in addressing a well-defined scope of priorities, similar to the process of the MEAs, would be key to increase funding from the JEF for the sound management of chemicals and waste. And these priorities shall include, amongst other areas, the objectives and targets currently under this discussion, pollution as a driver of biodiversity loss, prevention of chemical impacts, circular economy, and sustainable consumption and production. So these are the elements which were mentioned in the contributions, in the written submissions. And again, thank you very much for providing that input. And now I would like to open the floor on indeed, this issue about the dedicated external financing. And at this stage, with a clear notion on what the JEF, how we should approach the JEF in that context. The floor is open, please. Who would like to intervene?
There are no hands raised yet, Reggie. Okay, we have Laura from Finland.
Okay, thank you. Laura, EU, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Facilitator. Thanks for summarizing this part as well. And we do agree to what you reflected in the summary, that ICCM 5 actually could communicate to JEF on its need to support the implementation of the Beyond 2020 framework ahead of the JEF 8 replenishment, and especially focusing on elements which contribute to global benefits, as we know that this is the focus of the JEF funding. We see that options would be to highlight the need to operationalize the overall orientation guidance, so the OOG elements, as well as the strategic objectives and targets currently under discussion. And of course, we just note that the current focal area on chemicals and waste also include funding of the chemicals and waste conventions and the Montreal Protocol. I would also like to say a few words on the second question you had on the concrete actions which could support the implementation of the Beyond 2020 framework. We see a broad range of possible additional actions, which we have summarized in our submission. These include mapping of guidance through the development assistance and programs landscape as started by UNEP in document IB3/8. Continuous exchange with those responsible for the most relevant programs and funds to mainstream and better incorporate sound management of chemicals and waste activities. Implementation of the proposals made with regard to mainstreaming, which we previously mentioned here and in our submission. The prolongation of the UNEP special program, as well as promoting synergies with funding in other sectors. And here, for instance, it would be useful to look at the synergies with climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, EU, for your intervention. Somebody else wants to take the floor on this question on how to approach Jeff and what should be supported by Jeff? What are our SciChem wishes in that respect?
David from CL has requested the floor, followed by Servet from ICCA. Ready?
Okay, thank you. David, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. I'll promise to try to be brief. A number of things. First, we need to recognize that the JEF funding for SciChem is gravely under what it needs to be. Both the level of funding for JEF funding for chemicals in general, and in particular for SciChem, is extremely limited. So there should be a call first to increase the portion of JEF funding that is available for SciChem implementation. There are also a number of priorities areas for JEF 8 funding that should build on established areas of international concern as identified under SciChem, such as lead in paint, highly hazardous pesticide, single-use plastic, hazardous waste import, and the export of banned substances. And in that respect, I'm glad to see that the EU seem to be willing to move forward, and maybe they can act as a lead on something like this. There are also some comments in our submission about the special programs and how it can be used, but I wonder whether you want to raise that in a separate question or whether we should provide our comments in that same batch of comments.
A separate issue, please.
Okay. Then I'm done. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, David. Who was the next one, Eduardo? I forgot already.
Servet from ICCA.
Oh yeah, please, Servet, floor is yours, ICCA.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So we also support the previous speakers. We support the prioritization of funding for sound management chemicals by the JEF. And we also support the comments made by Laura on, let's say, continuing the special program, even maybe the quick start program that also had a good traction. What we would also like to highlight, and it is also part of our submission for the Clearinghouse catalog idea, is indeed to draft concrete projects that resonate with all the OOC elements, to make it actually, to facilitate for those countries that lack still all these 11 principles, to make it more understandable. So this is something that we call a catalog, where all stakeholders, including industry, can identify the expertise on which they can provide either funding or knowledge or technology. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Servet. Anybody else who would like to ask for the floor?
Next on the list is Agustin from Argentina, and followed by Andrew Clark from USA.
Okay. Agustin, please. Argentina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Secretariat and Mr. Chair. Yes, a few comments. I assume that GRULAC intervention won't be possible at this moment made by Anna, so I will highlight some inputs there and some views from Argentina. GRULAC has submitted a written text a little late, but I think it arrived. GRULAC is still supporting the paper, conference room paper presented in the IP3 with the possibility to explore the establishment of a new international fund for chemicals and waste management, and Argentina, of course, supports that, and we would like, we would seek for Secretariat to provide information on how could that be established. Regarding the two external financial mechanisms that are already in place, the JEF and the special program, we recognize that they have specific governing bodies where decisions are made. But one important thing that we would like to have from the ICCM5 is a clear guidance for those two mechanisms on what SciCom or the new framework is expecting from them, and which are the activities that are prioritized to be funded. We know that the GEF has funded within the chemicals and waste window a little bit of the activities under SICOM, and we would like to see more of that going into the next replenishment. And regarding the special program, of course, we would also like to have a clear definition from the conference to the funding on what to expect. Finally, just a second. We would also like to explore different types of external financing, because we developing countries have already access to these funds, which are donations, but as made in previous meetings and interventions, we would like to explore different types of fundings, loans, and other types that could also be used to enhance the activities and the work under this agenda. So we support to explore this creation of a new fund. We also support that if we have a mechanism to track the development of the financial issues, these two external financial GEF and special programs should those bodies should be invited to attend and participate in this evaluation process. And all of these findings and recommendations and reports should be also taken into account to the evaluation of the effectiveness of the framework that is being discussed in another group. So these aspects should be correctly reflected in this section. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Agustin. Point taken. So we will remember that, and that we have to address that anyway in our next discussion on the draft recommendation as such. Thank you very much. Next speaker on the list is Andrew Clark from the US, if I understand correctly. Andrew, yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Reggie. Yes, I think just to echo what many others have said, I think that it is important that this body take advantage of the fact that GEF group management is about to be, those discussions are about to be underway, and send a clear signal to into that process that we do about the high priority of the chemicals and waste local area and the need for that there to be robust support in that area. I think that we want to make sure that our new instrument has strong support there, but we also, of course, don't want that to be the cost of the amount of funding that would be available to support implementation of the Stockholm Convention and Minamata Convention. So, just to very briefly, we just align ourselves with that, and we look forward to working with other stakeholders on how we craft that signal that we send to them through the ICCM. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew, for your intervention. And the next speaker is Canada, Greg Philic, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Well, since it's the first time I'm taking the virtual floor, I'd like to express my thanks to Reggie and Jacob for conducting this meeting in such an excellent fashion. I think we're making good progress here. And good morning and afternoon and evening to all others. With respect to this item, I think it's important that we focus on building on the existing mechanisms that are in place. We've noted that it's the GEF and the UNEP special program that provide direct support to SICOM, but we should also keep in mind that overall, there are financial mechanisms supporting the key features of multilateral environmental agreements, which contribute to SICOM, of course, between the Montreal Protocol's multilateral fund, the Minamata specific program, the trust funds to the various conventions and the protocol. This is all funding from dedicated sources that is going to advance the chemicals and waste agenda. And again, just to emphasize, let's build on these existing mechanisms. Just wanted to mention a couple of things. With respect to the UNEP special program, we understand that there may be some difficulties with access to, say, non-environmental stakeholders and sectors. So that's something we would be interested in exploring with others, if that's a possibility to open up that access. We certainly echo the feelings of others with respect to the GEF replenishment process and the opportunities to send a strong signal. I participate as an advisor to Canada on the GEF, and it will be important discussions coming up for GEF replenishment, and there will be a lot of competition, if you will, for different from the different focal areas. So if SICAM wants to be considered for GEF funding, it really needs to express that. Just beyond what the existing mechanisms are, we would also be interested in exploring resource mobilization strategies to raise funds from other sources. The financial sector was noted in one of the previous sections. You know, when we speak of climate financing, that's critical to reaching that $100 billion goal, is that getting financial investments aligned with climate goals. Biodiversity funding, financing, exploring this as well. So it's an opportunity for chemicals to align itself with environmental goals through the financial investments. And further, I think this has also been mentioned, but it's important that we develop synergies with a number of other issues. The growing movement towards circular economies, climate change, tackling biodiversity loss, the green recovery to COVID-19, all of these require or have significant financing that's either has been or is going to be dedicated to them. And chemicals and waste has an important role in that, and we should be able to attract commensurate resources with that role if we explore it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Greg, for your input, for your intervention. Point taken. Eduardo, is there somebody else who would like to take the floor on this issue?
No, Reggie, there's no. Okay, yes, we have Japan.
Japan, okay, please, Japan, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator. Ato Shibasaki from Japan. I would like to make a brief intervention about the establishment of an international fund. We are skeptical about this idea. We think that the effective operation of a special program, which can receive financial contributions from non-government sector as well as government, should be given a priority and more explored, rather than creating a new financial mechanism, which will require additional cost for its management. Thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator.
Okay, thank you, Sushi from Japan, for your intervention. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Eduardo?
We don't have anyone else asking for the floor, Reggie.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just noticed that some delegations already addressed the issue of the special program. Sorry, I'm getting tired already. Somebody indeed also, it was David who also asked me the question before, okay, should I raise my questions or my points, my comments already on the special program now or later? And then I suggest to do it later. But since most of the delegations already touched upon the special program, I would now give the floor to David to make his intervention on, well, the special program item. Please, David, Ciel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. We do believe that the special program can be an important tool. There are a number of elements that limit its impact at this stage, and so we would suggest revising some of the terms of reference and some of the approaches of the special program. The first one, obviously, is to allow all relevant SICAM stakeholders to have access to the fund. Currently, the access to the fund is strictly limited to government. And as the UNEP evaluation of the integrated approach noted, civil society has lost a lot from the closure of the QSP, which civil society could apply for funding. And that recommended that UNEP should propose solution to address civil society financing in that respect. Also noting that civil society has been identified as a key player in implementing SICAM measures. The other limitation of the way the special program currently works is that it is limited to activities that fall under the GEF mandate. And we believe that this unnecessarily confines funding and undermines synergies that exist with the limited JEF funding. We believe that it would be more useful to open a little more larger the scope of activities that can be funded by the special program as the QSP actually provided. We also note that the special program is currently limited in time, and we believe that, as we've mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, as was highlighted by a number of participants, SciChem implementation will require clear, adequate, sustainable, and predictable financing, and this can only be achieved through a dedicated financial mechanism instrument. And so we believe that the time limitation should be addressed and dealt with. We understand that a lot of the terms of reference of the special programs may not be the responsibility of ICCM, but instead of UNEA. But considering that ICCM 5 will now be happening before the substantive portion of the United Nations Environment Assembly, which has been postponed to February 2022, it would be very important for ICCM 5 to make it very clear and to send a very clear signal to the authorities responsible for the special program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Point taken. Okay, thank you very much for your intervention. Anybody else who would like to intervene on the special program? In particular, those who have not yet asked for the floor yet?
There are no other requests for the floor, Reggie.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I suggest that we will stop with this agenda item. I think we had a very fruitful this discussion, and also it increased, well, at least my insight in all the proposals which were being made in this context. In particular, the question on whether or not we would need a international fund and what it would imply, what the role and what the function of it should be, in addition to existing programs like the special program and other multilateral and regional bilateral programs. It was very, well, interesting to hear the views. I don't think we can indeed reach agreement on whether or not to delete the reference to the fund. That is also not the objective of this session. It is indeed to get more insight in the reasoning behind all the proposals. So we have taken note that as co-facilitators, and we will together with the Secretariat try to write down exactly and to which captures all the positions taken by the stakeholders in this discussion. Okay, having said that, I suggest that we now, also given the time, move on to the next agenda item, that is the open discussion on capacity building. And may I please ask my co-facilitator, Jonna, to take over from me and lead the discussions on this agenda item. Jonna, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Reggie. So as we move forward with this agenda item, the open discussion on capacity building, the question that was circulated and requesting inputs on was what are the concrete mechanisms and actions regarding capacity building across sectors to support the Beyond 2020 program of work. From that question, we received a total of 10 submissions. We had Canada, the EU, MS, ICCA, IPEN, Norway, UNDP, UNEP, USA, GRULAC, WHO. And from these submissions, we summarized that all stakeholders acknowledge or understand the importance of concrete mechanisms and actions regarding the capacity building and agree that the new instrument should prioritize opportunities for capacity building and information exchange. We have touched somewhat on capacity building in the previous segment facilitated by Reggie, where the idea for starter of a capacity building clearinghouse was raised. Other considerations that we received through the submissions were that existing capacity building support through various programs and policy documents should be pointed out. Another one was that we could look at the establishment of an international recognized tier system of achievement as a way of incentivizing more robust implementation of core chemical management as proposed at IP3. So with that, I know that we're sort of pressed for time, but we'll open up the floor for comments. Eduardo, if there are any.
Yeah, there are no requests for the floors yet, Jonah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jonah, we have a request from Andrew Clark from USA, followed by David from CL.
Thank you, Eduardo. Andrew, please take the floor. Andrew from USA, thank you.
Thank you, and recognizing that we are very short on time, I'll be very brief. But you did mention the proposal that the United States made at IP3 that we have also included in our written submission. So I wanted to very briefly just introduce that. And this is the tiers of achievement proposal. So we took the inspiration for this proposal from the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, the CITES Convention. And the idea of this is that these different tiers of achievement and basic core chemicals management can help incentivize countries to make further advancements in their efforts and their ability to manage chemicals and help implement SICOM. So I would just invite everyone to please look at the proposal, but just as a quick run through, so we could start with a tier 3, which would be to take priority risk reduction actions and have a system in place to inventory and evaluate the safety of chemicals and implement further risk management activities. And then countries could advance further to a tier 2, which would include all of the tier 3 elements, as well as implementing compliance of monitoring and enforcement strategy. And then a tier 1 would be advancing tier 3 and tier 2. And would also establish policies or incentives to encourage the development of safer alternatives and innovative and sustainable solutions. And in the interest of time, I won't go into that any further, but just to note, we did cite some examples for all of these. And, we are also, of course, understanding that the exact nature of these tiers could be up for discussion, but we think this would be a way to help advance this core chemicals management activities would enable countries to better implement SICOM and also as a co-benefit to better implement the other chemicals conventions. Thank you.
Thank you, David from USA for elaborating on the tier system. We'll now give the floor to David from CL. David, please on the floor.
Thank you very much. We also have some written submissions provided, so we invite everyone to take a look at them. 2 quick points to feed on the discussion. First of all, to recognize that all capacity building and awareness raising activities will require resources. So I don't think we should look at capacity building as a either or element of capacity building, but as those two well integrated, and also recognize that capacity building will also require some large amount of financing. Furthermore, we would also like to highlight one of the proposals that I believe we had already proposed in previous conversation and that have been discussed to a certain extent, which is the idea to increase coordination at the national level and to use the existing Montreal Protocol unit that exists in most of the countries in the world and broaden their scope to fund also to also include chemical and waste aspects, so they can serve as coordinating multidisciplinary national operations for the implementation of SICAM, the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm, and Minamata Convention. There's some more explanation and rationale for that proposal in the written submission that we provided to all participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Eduardo, are there any more requests for the floor?
There are no additional requests for the floor, John. Okay, we have one coming in from Laura on behalf of the EU.
All right, thank you. Laura from the EU, please take the floor.
Yes, I hope you can hear me. Just very briefly, sorry?
Yes, we can hear you. Go
Okay,
ahead, please.
okay, thank you. So just very briefly, besides the comments we made previously, we wanted to note here the work done by the IOMC organization since 2006 in providing capacity building support through various programs and guidance materials. And we would welcome that these are made further use of and perhaps also more communicated, and would also highlight that EU and its member states have also developed programs aiming to collaboration and concretely support the countries in building capacity. And we look forward to hearing on the specific needs of the recipient countries with regard to capacity building and discuss the possible ways to meet them. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Laura, for your intervention. Are there any more interventions, requests for the floor, Eduardo?
It seems that there are no more requests.
Okay, thank you very much. We have come to the end, if there are no more requests for the floor, of our discussions for today. I'd like to thank all the participants, all who contributed to a very vibrant and informative discussion. I would like to encourage everyone to look at the submissions by the various delegations or parties that are located on the webpage, where you can get a more in-depth insight on the various submissions made, and we could see where we could have commonalities among views presented. So without further ado, I will pass back on to my co-facilitator, Reggie. And once again, thank you all for your contribution and your presence. Thanks to the Secretariat for the support that they have provided to Eduardo, Nalini, and Samantha, I believe. Reggie, take the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonah, for giving me the floor again. Well, indeed, what are the next steps? And first of all, we have to look what is the role of the electronic approach, the request for submissions. But before doing that, I just want to come back on what we discussed on the GEF and the dedicated external financing in that respect. What I noticed, there was indeed, well, at least support, and I think overwhelming support, that we as a group, we should give a clear signal to the GEF replenishment negotiations that there is indeed a need for the SICAM beyond 2020 to be taken into account, if I may say so. So from that point of view, it may be perhaps useful, since also the replenishment activities will start in April next year, that we as a group prepare a letter or at least a document or whatsoever for consideration by the Bureau of the ICCM, and that they can use such a message, such a letter, which they then can consequently share with the negotiating process, with the GEF Secretariat to start with, or the GEF CEO and chairperson, that at least we are working on this matter. We are talking about the future of the SICAM Beyond 2020 framework, that it would require financial support for that, and that we asked the negotiating process, the replenishment process number 8, to take into account the work of the Beyond 2020 activities in the field of chemicals and waste. So if you agree, then we would prepare as co-facilitators in close cooperation with the SAICM Secretariat a letter which ultimately will be submitted to the Bureau of the ICCM5, which they can take into account and consequently send to the replenishment aid discussions, which will start, as I understand, in April next year. So that's the question which is still open with respect to the dedicated external financing. Is such an approach acceptable for the group?
There are two requests for intervention. One from Greg Philic from Canada, followed by Servet from ICCA.
Okay, thank you. Greg Philic, please, Canada.
Hi, thanks. I'll try to be very quick and brief. Well, thanks for proposal. As I think as myself and others have mentioned, it would be good for, if you want to get GEF funding, you need to ask for it. I'm just wondering though, is the Bureau the best vehicle for that? We do have an ICCM meeting, which is, let's say, analogous to a COP from an MEA, and it's the COP that would provide guidance and to the GEF. So in my mind, it should be the ICCM meeting in July, and that's still within the GEF 8 replenishment process, which will take in April, but it goes for at least a year. And of course, the COPs for the MEAs are meeting in July as well. So I would be fine personally with you preparing something, a draft, maybe indicating through the Bureau that something will be forthcoming to the GEF. But it's really up to the ICCM, to me, that should be providing that final or formal guide, or I guess request to the GEF. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Greg. You're indeed good advice from the Canadian advisor to the GEF Council. Thank you very much. Servet, please. ICCA.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. I do apologize that I take the floor, and I will be very brief. I had some internet connection, so please bear with me. I would like to thank you and also the others, Laura and others, for their comments on our proposal. And I'm happy to take up your proposal to form this small team. And maybe we should take it offline on how we can do this practically. The other point I wanted to make is the proposal that you just made on the GEF letter, which we also fully support. On the SAICM Bureau, it might be helpful to maybe share it with them in advance, as the Bureau members have good influence to their constituencies. So before also giving it at the ICCM5, as our Canadian colleague mentioned correctly, it would be helpful if the SAICM Bureau can maybe also raise the awareness with using their constituencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ICCA, for this intervention. Anybody else?
There is Andrew Clark from USA, Reggie.
Thank you. Andrew, please, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Reggie. Just to be very brief, I just agree with what Canada said regarding the suggestion to the GEF. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, let's then think about it. Well, at least we could give a clear signal to the ICCM Bureau in this respect. It would be worthwhile to have an explicit reference to the GEF replenishment anyway in the outcome of the ICCM 5 as such. But we will consider on how to do what's the best way to move forward. Thank you.
There is Laura from the EU that has requested the floor, Reggie.
Thank you. Laura, please, EU.
Thank you very much for this opportunity and for the proposal from the co-facilitators. I think we also agree with the comments made by Canada, that we see that the main indication of guidance should come from ICCM 5, but also considering your point that the GEF 8 replenishment first meeting starts earlier, it might be useful to communicate this through the Bureau, at least to all the regions, so that people can take action also nationally. So in that way, we would welcome to see a draft letter by you for further consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura, for this intervention. Okay. Yvette, you would still like to ask for the floor, or?
There are no additional requests.
Okay, no additional requests. Okay, well then I suggest if at least that we prepare, well, at least a letter for our ICCM bureau to consider. And they can consider, first of all, the content, but ultimately they can also consider of sending, well, this message already to the replenishment process, well, before ultimately the ICCM will really invite the GEF Council to take into account, or all those countries who are involved in the replenishment, that they take into account also the work of the Beyond 2020 Chemicals and Waste cluster. If it is okay for the group, or is Canada and the US, are they against such a pre-warning, if I may say so? Greg, is that okay for you, and Andrew? And we acknowledge, of course, that ultimately it should be the ICCM who should formally well, request for it, but perhaps a pre-warning might be helpful already at the start of the negotiating process.
Can you hear me? It's Greg.
Yeah, Greg, please.
Hi, thanks. I would be fine with your approach at just recognizing that the ultimate decision to go forward is the ICCM, but giving a heads up through the Bureau to, I think would be, well, would be prudent. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Andrew, is that also okay for you?
Yes, thank you. I was going to say similarly. I think it is. Sorry, okay. Just to say that I think it is prudent to send the letter, and just note that the ICCM intends to take up the issue, but I think we would want to make sure that it doesn't have any, you know, any suggestion on what that guidance will ultimately look like, because we do need to have that discussion at the ICCM. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Well, since we are running out of time, or have already run out of time, I think we should move forward. The next steps. Well, there will be a second request. Well, the former slide indeed indicated what the next steps implies. That we will ask for electronic inputs on various issues, on the strategic partnerships, financing the secretariat, the resource mobilization and cost recovery mechanisms, and other economic instruments. That will start that submission period on the 20th of November, and it will end the 11th of December 2020. And then consequently, the next steps are listed in the following slide. We will receive them by the 11th of December, and our next virtual working group meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, 16th of December, 2020, between 2 and 4 hours CET in the afternoon. So that are the next steps, well, a lot of work in front of us, not only in this virtual working group, but also in all the other ones, but at least we are still keeping busy and trying to move forward with our discussion in preparing IP4. And I sincerely hope that we can meet in person next time at the IP4, but let's see how the developments with respect to COVID-19 will go on. Having said that, I also would like to thank you very much for your participation, for your active participation. We have taken note and written down all your comments you made at this meeting, and we will digest them. And ultimately, we will put them in a sort of well, considerations prepared by the co-chairs, by the co-facilitators, and we will share that ultimately or with the others in this whole discussion on the post-2020 framework. Having said that, may I briefly now also ask Jonah to give his final remarks, and also the secretariat, if you have some work to do in that respect. And also thank you very much, ICAM Secretariat, for organizing and facilitating this meeting. Jonah, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Reggie. I would just like to reiterate the points that you raised, that all comments, contributions, and interventions were recorded and will be taken into consideration as we forward discussions in this whole post-2020 framework. Once again, I would like to thank the participants for their very active contribution, very vibrant discussions. It was much appreciated. Thanks for your indulgence with sometimes bad internet connection, but it happens and we're still pushing forward to get the work done. Finally, thanks to the Secretariat for the support through this whole process. We look forward to seeing all of you at our next virtual meeting. Thank you. Have a good morning. Good evening. Stay safe. Hand it over to the Secretariat for any closing remarks. Thank you.
Nalini, would you like to take the floor for closing remarks?
No, you go ahead, Eduardo. And thank you, everybody, for participating. I recognize that this meeting, you weren't able to see each other. There was a glitch in the system, but for the next meeting and subsequent meetings, we'll make sure that that's addressed and so that you can see all the attendees. So apologies from our side for that issue. So you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Nalini. So from the Secretariat side, just to reiterate that we are all working behind the scenes to support the work of this group. And we thank everyone as well for their participation and also for the submissions of electronic inputs. We remind you to go to the website at SciCam.org to review any other documentation that we might post in this website, including the summary of the report of this meeting and the recording as well, which will be publicly available and also accessible for delegations that could not attend today's meeting. And with that said, thanks as well to our two co-facilitators who are leading the work of this virtual working group, and look forward to receiving your second submission of inputs and seeing the next meeting on the 16th of December. Thank you very much for your attendance. Bye-bye, everyone.